Good evening, I'm Maham Tara with the news-making headlines around the world. The National Assembly dedicates a special session to discuss the affairs of the individuals with special needs. The Council of Ministers reviews in its session today the broad lines of the budget in the fiscal year 2015-2016. Reports say the IS chief is critically wounded in US airstrikes on extremist leaders' convoy. And a blast at a school in northeastern Nigeria leaves 47 people dead a week after a suicide bomber in the same town killed at least 26 people. In our first item, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, His Highness the Emir Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmed Al-Jaber Al-Sabah received at Sif Palace today His Excellency the First Deputy Premier and Minister of Foreign Affairs Sheikh Sabah Al-Khalid Al-Hamad Al-Sabah. The National Assembly held its 11th session to discuss conditions of the people with special needs. The session was sponsored by the Assembly Speaker Marzouk Ali Al-Ghanem. Speaking at the meeting, the Director General of the Public Authority for Individuals with Special Needs Affairs, Dr. Tariq Al-Shatti, said, "This group enjoyed the attention of His Highness the Emir Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmed Al-Jaber Al-Sabah, who issued Law Number 8 for the year 2010, thanks to the sincere efforts by the National Assembly." He described the law as the most advanced law in the Arab world, which deals with issues of individuals with special needs. Dr. Al-Shatti said the authority agreement with Kuwait Credit Bank entered the implementation phase, according to which the Emiri grant will be raised to 20,000 Kuwaiti dinars. Dr. Al-Shatti then outlined the benefits that are being allocated to the disabled people, including financial support to the women who are responsible with individuals with special needs.
سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
The Council of Ministers met in a weekly session today under the chairmanship of His Highness Sheikh Jabal Mbarak Al-Hamad Al-Sabah, the Prime Minister, and took note of two messages to His Highness the Emir from the Presidents of Mauritania and Togo. The Minister of State for Cabinet Affairs, Sheikh Mohammed Abdullah Al-Mbarak Al-Sabah, said in his briefing after the meeting that the First Deputy Premier and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sheikh Sabah Al-Khalid Al-Hamad Al-Sabah, elaborated during the session on the Gulf tour by His Highness the Emir to the United Arab Emirates, Qatar and Bahrain. He said the tour reflected the strength of the existing historic relations between those countries and the State of Kuwait. He added that the various aspects of cooperation among the GCC member states were discussed during the tour, in addition to other developments on the regional and international arenas. The Minister of Finance, Anas Saleh, then outlined the budget of the fiscal year 2015-2016. The Governor of the Central Bank of Kuwait, Dr. Mohammed Al-Hashel, and the Undersecretary of the Ministry of Finance, Khalifa Hamada, beside other senior officials at the ministry, conducted detailed presentations about the estimated revenues and expenditure of the government ministries and agencies during this period. They also briefed the Cabinet on the ministry's proposal to face the sudden drop in oil prices at the international markets. The Minister of State for Cabinet Affairs said the Council of Ministers commended the efforts made by the Ministry of Finance and other departments for the preparations of this budget. The Council of Ministers asked the various ministries to rationalize the expenditure in the manner that will serve the country's interest. The Council of Ministers also reviewed the report published by the Central Bank of Kuwait regarding the second annual financial stability of the year 2013, which is an annual report usually published by the bank. It concentrates on the evaluation and analysis of the economic and financial developments in view of the perspective of their relations to the financial stability in the country and the risk analysis which the financial system may face. The Minister of State for Cabinet Affairs said the Council of Ministers also discussed the political affairs in view of the incoming reports related to the latest political developments at the Arab and international levels. Minister of Oil and Minister of State for National Assembly Affairs, Dr. Ali Lamir, said he did not expect the oil prices to drop to the level that may threaten the country's economy, adding that prices may go down from their current level, but they will settle at the end. Speaking on the sidelines of the energy conference in Abu Dhabi, Dr. Lamir said the surplus in oil output will be quickly absorbed by the market. However, the Minister of Oil ruled out the possibility of cutting down OPEC production ceiling in the organization's forthcoming meeting on the 27th of November. Iraqi officials said today that the head of the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, was wounded in an airstrike in western Anbar province. Pentagon officials said they had no immediate information on such an attack or on the militant leader being injured. Iraq's defense and interior ministries both issued statements saying al-Baghdadi had been wounded without elaborating, and the news was broadcast on state-run television last night. The reports came at a time when U.S. President Barack Obama said the U.S.-led coalition was in a position to start going on the offensive against the IS militants. An Interior Ministry intelligence official told the press that al-Baghdadi was wounded by an Iraqi airstrike that came during a meeting with militants in the town of Qaim. Talks between Iran, the United States and the European Union were extended for a second day as a deadline for a comprehensive nuclear agreement with Iran approaches. The meeting comes a year after Iran and 6 world powers agreed an interim deal to limit Iran's nuclear activities in exchange for some relief on Western sanctions. Badriya Saleh has more in the following report.
Iran, the United States, and the European Union began an unscheduled second day of talks today over disagreements blocking the resolution of confrontation over Tehran's nuclear program. With 2 weeks to a deadline for an overhaul agreement, Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Zarif Sharif and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, as well as EU envoy Catherine Ashton, met at Oman's capital today to tackle a decade-long dispute, which has raised the risk of wider conflict in the Middle East. U.S. and Iranian officials noted the discussions aim to put variable limits on Iran's uranium enrichment work and any other potential path to a nuclear weapon in return for a gradual lifting of sanctions. These stakes are high as the November 24th deadline approaches. A deal could quell Middle East fears about Iran's ability to build a nuclear bomb and help revive the Islamic Republic's economy. For his part, U.S. President Barack Obama said that there was still a big gap between Iran and Western powers and said a deal could be out of reach. Obama said the economic sanctions led by the United States have pushed Iran to the table of an agreement over its nuclear program. While Western and Iranian diplomats are involved in the negotiations, the toughest outstanding issues are the size of Iran's enrichment program, the length of a long-term accord, and the pace at which sanctions would be phased out. Western countries suspect Iran has secretly attempted to acquire the means to build nuclear weapons. However, Iran says it wants peaceful nuclear energy only, but has refused to curb enrichment capacity and has been hit by demanding U.S., EU, and UN Security Council sanctions as a result.
Afghan officials said bombs exploded in 3 cities in Afghanistan today, killing at least 10 policemen, a day after a Taliban suicide bomber blew himself in Kabul's police headquarters, killing 1 person. The militants claimed responsibility for 2 of the attacks, which killed the policemen, 7 of them in the eastern province of Logar province, when a suicide bomber blew himself up at the provincial police headquarters. In Nangarhar province, also in the east, 3 policemen were killed in the city of Jalalabad by a bomb planted in a rickshaw. At least 47 people were killed and 79 wounded today by a suicide bombing outside a school in northern Nigeria. Police said the attacker was disguised as a student when he set off the explosion in a government boarding school in the town of Potoskum. The explosion took place at 7:50 a.m. local time outside the principal's office, where students gather for a daily speech. It was not immediately clear how many of the casualties were students, with no one claiming responsibility. During the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, the APEC in Beijing, U.S. President Barack Obama said a deal improving trade and business ties between the world's two largest countries, China and the United States, will be put into effect on the 12th of November, whereby both countries would extend the terms of multiple entry short-term tourist and business visas to 10 years from 1 year, and student visas would be extended to 5 years from 1 year. The leaders of China and Japan have met for formal talks after more than 2 years of severe tension over a territorial dispute. Chinese President Xi Jinping and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe met on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, the APEC, in Beijing. Today's face-to-face meeting with Shinzo Abe is important progress in relations between the world's second and third largest economies. But the underlying disagreements over territory and history remain as bitter as ever. This summit brings together neighbors with different worldviews at a difficult moment in history. An informal vote on independence for Catalonia has shown more than 80% in favor. Officials said the non-binding vote went ahead after Spain's Constitutional Court ruled out holding a formal referendum in the autonomous northeastern region. More than 2 million people out of an estimated 5.4 million eligible voters took part in the ballot. Catalan leader Artur Mas hailed the poll a great success that should pave the way for a formal referendum. According to the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, a Soyuz space capsule carrying 3 crew members landed safely in the town of Arkelik, northern Kazakhstan, today. Russian commander, U.S. flight engineer and German flight engineer returned to Earth after 5 months in orbit. They were received and treated by a recovery team as soon as they touched down in Arkelik this morning. The 3 crewmen arrived at the International Space Station on May the 29th on the Russian Soyuz spacecraft. According to NASA, this was the first space mission for NASA's Wiseman and Ghost of the European Space Agency. Recently, the Science International Forum launched its first official meeting in Kuwait at the Indian Embassy. Under the patronage of the Indian Ambassador to Kuwait, His Excellency Sunil Jain, the event officially announced this year's programs specifically designed to imparting scientific knowledge and motivating students. Reporter Badriya Saleh brings us this report.
The official launch meet of Science International Forum Kuwait was held at the Indian Embassy Hall this November and was inaugurated by His Excellency, the Indian Ambassador to Kuwait, Sunil Jain. Established in Oman nearly 10 years ago, SIF is part of a team of around 6,000 scientists and technocrats in India working closely with the Department of Science and Technology of the Government of India and other institutions with the specific aim to popularize science among school children.
It is indeed a very happy and satisfying moment for us because 3 months of our hectic preparations by our volunteer team is now taking the shape of a launch event. 3 months back, when the volunteers of the National Science Movement, when they approached us to find out the possibilities of starting our activities in Kuwait, many were skeptical about it. Primarily because we want to know how the response of the community will be, because we are going to launch another association. Now, moreover, we are talking about a dedicated science movement or a dedicated science organization where the scope of other functions like entertainment is actually near, almost. But when the discussions move forward, one thing was actually very clear. All other countries like UAE, Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, almost all other countries in the Middle East have progressed and benefited a lot from these programs. And our children in Kuwait is facing some of the biggest opportunities of their life. National Science Movement, he is also the chairman of the Governing Council of IIT Delhi. He is the current president of Bitan Bharati. The organization works tirelessly to popularize science among children and motivate them to take up science as a career and encourage them to contribute towards India's vision, or the India Vision 2020, the famous vision statement put forward by none other than Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam.
The official representative of National Science Movement India, SIF Kuwait, is a voluntary organization formed and supported by professionals in fields of science and technology, education, along with the assistance of philanthropists and prominent members of the Indian community right here in Kuwait. At the Indian Embassy, I'm Badriya Saleh, reporting for the English News.
And finally, in local business news, where the main indices of Kuwait Stock Exchange entered the trade in red zone today. The UAE index read 473.03, losing 1.74 points. The price index dropped to 7,132.91, shedding up to 49.89 points. And the KSX 15 index settled at 1,146.13, losing 2.96 points. The number of trades amounted to 3,300 transactions, worth about 16 million Kuwaiti dinars, with around 126 million shares changing hands. For a chance to see our reports again, please visit our YouTube channel at NOI Kuwait News. Well, with that, we conclude our news bulletin. Thank you for joining us. Have a pleasant time. I'm Maham Tawa. Before we go, we remind you once again of the main top stories. Have a pleasant time and good night. The National Assembly dedicates a special session to discuss the affairs of the individuals with special needs. The Council of Ministers reviews in its session today the broad lines of the budget of the fiscal year 2015-2016. Report says the IS chief is critically wounded in US airstrikes on extremist leaders' convoy. And a blast at a school in northeastern Nigeria leaves 47 people dead a week after a suicide bomber in the same town killed at least 26 people.